Hello everyone, I'm Surya Gulagani, Director of Marketing here at Datagaps, and thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, we have a couple of quick housekeeping comments. First, we have muted all mics to avoid unintended distractions. Next, the chat room is open so that you can interact with us through the chat. And finally, at the end of the session, we will open it up for Q&A. Today in this webinar, we will learn how you can automate your Tableau testing using Datagaps BI Validator. On the panel today, we have David Small, VP of Sales and Marketing at Datagaps, and Shubhanshu Dikshit, our Product Manager at Datagaps. And here is our agenda for today. So we'll have a quick overview of Datagaps. Next, we will discuss what BI Validator is, how and where this is useful, and how it helps automate your BI testing. Then we move into its demo and a use case to demonstrate how the report validations, followed by a Q&A session. Now I hand this over to Dave. Dave, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Surya. Yeah, this is Dave Small. I'm Vice President Sales at Datagaps, and really just want to set the stage for the demonstrations today and talk about what Datagaps is all about, what we focus on, and why we focus on that. So Datagaps, we focus on the accuracy of your data pipeline from the point of ingestion of data into the pipeline through to consumption of the data after it goes through your ETL processes and data movement, but the consumption in the data analytics platform. The objective is to be able to provide a mechanism where you can make decisions based upon trustworthy data. And that's our goal, and that's our mission every day. So why do we focus on that? Well, first of all, business intelligence marketplace really is growing in a substantial market for organizations. But the reason we're focused on this is that bad data costs the U.S. economy about $3.1 trillion a year. And if we can help eliminate some of that, you can improve your processes and reduce your cost tremendously. Recent study says that companies invest more than $50 million in business intelligence, and some have invested upwards of $500 million, but they're not getting the results that they would like. It's improving, but it's not getting the results that they would expect. And one of the main reasons for that is lack of adoption. And the reasons for lack of adoption are the trust in the data, or they're getting wrong data, lack of training, or poor performance. And we focus in those areas in business intelligence at Datagaps. We're talking about Tableau today. Tableau has about 16% of the market share, and 46,000 companies, over 46,000 companies using Tableau in the industry today. So we're focused on that as a major part of the industry as well. So what can go wrong? What could go wrong in data analytics? Well, here's an example of a dashboard that has charts, multiple charts. It has metrics. It has filters. All this data could be coming from one source. It could have been coming from your ETL processes, from in your data warehouse, data lakes. But there's a lot of moving parts. It could be coming from multiple sources. And a lot of times what you want to do is validate that this data is accurate and has been moved and consumed and now being displayed correctly. So what are some of the causes of things that can go wrong? One is it's just the sheer number of dashboards and data elements that need to be displayed and need to be verified to make sure that you're making those decisions based upon trusted data. We have one organization that does upgrades of the application or the software, and those upgrades oftentimes introduced anomalies in their applications. Changes in the metadata trickle down into your data analytics platform and cause problems at times. Changes in the underlying database or changes in your ETL process, all of these things have to work properly and consistently to be able to provide information and for you to apply data analytics to it. So what we do One part of what we do is the BI validation. We do regression testing, upgrade testing, catalog testing, a wide variety of things to make sure that your data analytics platform is running properly. So as data comes into the enterprise, we help validate that that data has been moved properly and it is of proper data quality. As it lands and moves through your ETL processes, we help validate that as well. But what we'll be talking about today is really the right side of this diagram and the ability to do regression testing and performance testing and a variety of tests in the dashboards in your data analytics platform, and specifically Tableau in this case. So we do that through a suite of products. Today we'll be talking about BI Validator. The DataOps suite takes care of the left-hand side of this diagram, and BI Validator takes care of the right. BI Validator is a client-server implementation. We install on-prem or in your cloud, but behind your firewalls. And we do not have any access to that data or that software whatsoever. So one particular example of where a company benefited by using BI Validator is one of the pharma organizations. They had a large number of installations of Tableau, over 50,000 users, thousands of workbooks. And every time the Tableau would release a new release or the application was modified, a new release of the application would happen, then they needed to do regression testing. And it typically took them 5 people 30 days to do that regression testing. So as you can see, that's very time consuming and costly for them to be able to do that. By implementing BI Validator, they reduced that manual testing by 90%. And they were able to do more upgrades throughout the year to improve performance or improve the application or upgrade to different versions of Tableau. So BI Validator architecture is represented here. Everything that you do is on your desktop interacting with the BI Validator client. So that's where you create your test cases. That's where you tell BI Validator that I want to invoke a certain Tableau environment. A lot of things happen in that client environment, and that information needs to be stored someplace. It's typically stored in the Postgres repository, and that's where extracted data may be stored, metadata, test runs, run histories. A lot of information gets stored there, along with being able to connect into your Tableau environment. So we layer in on top of Tableau and we invoke the Tableau procedures, dashboards, reports, and there's times we want to take a snapshot for later comparison. That information gets stored back in that repository at times as well. And then finally, we have BI Validator Server. And the purpose of the BI Validator Server, it's an optional component, but it gives you the ability to hand somebody a URL and so they can do browser-based reporting against the results of the test plans. You can also invoke test plans through the command line execution. So you can invoke test plans from outside of BI Validator in some of the tools that you're accustomed to use in your DevOps environment. And then also we provide a scheduler as part of this BI Validator Server. So you can schedule your test cases to run on a regular basis. So today we'll be talking about Tableau Part 1. And what we'll be focused on are the report test plan, the upgrade test plan, the functional test plan, and the data compare test plan. We plan on running another series of this where we'll talk more about the stress plan, the security test plan. Those are more system level type things. But today, during the demo, we'll focus on these 4 test plans out of the 8 for Tableau. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Shibanshu for the demo. And please, if you like, add your questions to the chat and we'll get back to those at the end of the session. Thank you. Much appreciated your attention.
Once again, welcome. Thanks, Dave, for that initial starting deck. And now we are in the BI validation demo. The way we're going to go forward with this is that we're going to start with a simple agenda. We're going to go through the aspects that we are going to discuss in this demo. Then we are going to go through the exact demo, followed by the questions. And once again, please feel free to have the questions and please ask those in the chat. This is a back and forth. As many questions as required are desirable in this case. So let's get started, starting with the agenda. The way we're going to do this demo is that the screen that you see first and foremost will be explained. First, that will showcase how the application works, how the integration works. And then we'll get through a few test cases and along with the results on how exactly this might be used for your specific use cases. Let's get started. When it comes to BI validation, we have identified that there are about 8 specific business use cases categories. So these are basic categories which can be altered further, but the basic gist are as follows. The first one is with regards to maintaining report integrity through upgrades and cycles. And so if you're ever going to have an upgrade, whether be it of your software or your environment, you need to ensure that pre and post upgrade, your corresponding reports are valid and the same. The same works for regression as well if you're changing or going through any development cycle. The other use case that comes forward is that you would like to validate your report against data sets. An example here would be that if your report is created in the morning and your data set refreshes in the evening, you'd like to ensure that when you do send the report out the next day or in the evening, the report is still valid. Of course, the objectively better option would be to recreate the report and send it forward. But in some cases where you are very confident that the data set has not changed, this can still be something laid on top of it, among other specific use cases. Of course, if you're comparing reports against data, you would like to compare reports against other reports as well. This could be within teams, it could be within organizations or within environments itself. If you have a report in the development environment versus a report in the pre-production or production, you would like to ensure that not only the data sets, but the metadata and other aspects, the aesthetics, the filters, the actions, and other such pages within these reports are actually valid against both the systems, be it different teams, different environments, or different projects. That's where data compare test plan comes into picture. And one of our star players, which is functional test plan, comes into picture where we like to go one step further and ensure that the reports that you're working with are actually valid from a business requirements perspective or from a functional requirement perspective. You'd like to ensure that numbers that are not possible within your particular data sets or numbers within out of certain ranges, names with different patterns, codes who do not follow specific patterns, everything along these lines that you'd like to achieve can be achieved using, and more, of course, can be achieved using the functional test plan. Of course, we are going to be focused on the right side of this graph, but I would like to definitely take my time here right now and explain what the other side of the graph entails. And because this is something that we'll be covering in the next webinar, but I'd like to ensure that we do discuss this a little. Start with the catalog test plan. The business use case this is targeted towards is to ensure that the metadata and the aesthetics of a report have not been altered. Take, for example, the fact that your organization sends out thousands of reports through multiple stakeholders through around the globe, and you like to ensure that the standard format has not been altered at any point. You like to ensure that this aesthetic that is chosen, carefully chosen by your UI UX developers for the reports are actually valid throughout and standardized. So you like to ensure that the aesthetics of a report have not been altered, even when compared to the previous versions. That's one. Something that comes along with aesthetics is also the filters, the pages, the actions, the supplementary things that are fixed into your reports along with the data sets. You'd like to ensure that these have not been altered, be it the color scheme, be it the size, be it the position, be it the types, with the exact filters itself. Catalog test plan takes care of all those aspects as well. Moving to the next use case, which is with regards to load times and optimization. Stress test plan and performance test plan works through these. Stress test plan basically ensures that there is a stress test simulation run on your corresponding reports to validate how long the reports take to load, if the reports are being loaded correctly, if there are any errors faced, if there are any timeouts faced, and other aspects. Performance test plan runs in the similar vein, but it works towards validating optimizations and performance of the reports. The way that works is it keeps track of your corresponding report over the course of a few days or few runs and ensures that the performance, if ever it drops, there's a notification being sent out. Finally, the last aspect of BI validation that cannot be ignored is the access control. You'd like to ensure that at every point, only the correct folks with the access to correct data set can access these records and reports. And thus, we also have a security test plan that personifies this by creating accounts and trying to pull data sets where they should not pull data sets, thus giving a hard hit to the security plan of the corresponding environment. So that was a lot of specific aspects on what exactly we're trying to cover. Of course, in this particular use case, we'll be sticking to the top 4, as you see here. And now we'll get directly into the BI validation system. So welcome to BI Validator. If anyone of you are here from the Power BI validation, you'll see there's a lot of parallels here. But rest assured, the test plans are slightly different. So first and foremost, how exactly does BI Validator work? Dave has gone through a good depth of it, and we have a good amount of material around it. But in basic sense, this application is installed currently in your Windows environment. You install it, and the application works using JavaScript APIs and REST APIs, JavaScript methods and REST APIs, along with Selenium to connect to corresponding sources, be it DB sources or BI sources. And from there, once the data is pulled, processes the data internally. So let's get to the main crux on the different things that we see. In the home page, you see the main aspects of creating test plans, creating connections, and reviewing the run history. We also see that we have a variety of test plans right here, along with how many test plans have been run in the past, and so on and so forth. And the next tab is our connections. So we'll see where the distinction between BI connection and DB connections. DB connections comes into play when we are discussing data compare, and we'll come to this when we discuss that particular plan. But for now, with regards to BI connection, you'll see I've already opened up a connection. This is our Tableau connection. Let me just close this once again. We have 2 Tableau connections. The reason we have 2 is also going to come in handy when we are discussing upgrade test plans. For now, we have the test plan. We define a connection name. We define the URL, the username, password, the credentials that we need. The REST API version at the end of the Tableau version that you're working with is detected. And you can define a site ID, or if you're working with the default, you can do that. Post that, you can test this corresponding connection and run with it. In this particular demo, I have prepared everything for a smooth demo play, and also to save time. So in this particular fashion, we have defined 2 Tableau connections. Assume one is for production and one is for development. In the same way, you can also define DB connections. The same thing that you need here are credentials. Now, let's go to the main crux, which are the test plans. You see, as of now, we have different Power BI test plans as well as Tableau. Let me just minimize these. And within these multiple test plans, we'll be focused on the 5 test plans that were discussed. These were functional test plans, the upgrade test plan, regression test plan, and data comparison. The first thing before I get into any of these is I'll explain the other aspects that are present here. Within our application, we also have a way to monitor the run history, what all runs happen in what all past few days, what are the results of this run, what are the exact aspects done. This is because you can run things based on a scheduler event as well. You can define on a recurring basis which test cases you want to run at which point. This could also incur benchmarking and other aspects, which we'll discuss shortly. Along with this, we have inherent notification systems that can assure that in case there is a planned run that has failed, that has seen some anomalies in the report anomalies are detected, the corresponding notification can be sent as an email or other integrations with Slack, Teams, or any other notification system that your team works with. Now let's get to test plan. I'll be grouping by labels, and I'll be selecting the very first test plan, which is already open right here, which is the functional test plan. Now, functional test plan is kind of our star test plan because it contains everything that we would like to achieve. It's not just validation of business rules and logic, but it's also data comparison, making sure that the report is not changing throughout run after run. So how do you start with this particular system? Well, in the properties, you define the name for your test plan. You define the connection you're working with. You define if it's a corresponding administrator group or not. There are other options to ensure what are things you'll be taken into account. So here I'm just ensuring I'm not taking a snapshot, but I'm ensuring that views, worksheets, columns, parameters, filters, everything is being taken into account so that if there's any variation or altercation between these, that is something that the application can catch. And advanced options is just something to help the user define how many rows will be taken into consideration in this case. I can put this to 0 to ensure I'll get a full data set. For this demo, we are sticking to 10,000 records because our original record is less than that. Now, within add views, I can add the views I'd like to select. These views are actually part of the workbook I'm working with. For the sake of simplicity, I've actually opened this workbook previously right here, and this is the workbook that I'm working with. If I go to edit right here, you'll see that there are multiple tabs, there are 2 data sets. This is a fairly simple data set that I'm working with, which is the global superstore. Going back to BI Validator, you see that I've already benchmarked these aspects. And I would like to take a time out to actually discuss what benchmarking is. Benchmarking is us taking a snapshot of the corresponding report to use as a source of truth. The benchmark report is what corresponding subsequent reports will be tested upon, will be validated and compared with. So when you benchmark a particular report, you actually check whether these reports are being validated correctly or not. This is the main point of benchmarking. And you'll see benchmark pop up in upgrade and report test plans and other aspects as well, because that's a standard method to ensure that we are defining a source of truth for ourselves. Because when we are comparing A and B, at least A or B needs to be the valid aspect here. So once we have defined benchmark, let's get into details on what exactly can we do in this particular test views. So here within the dashboard, as you can see, I have a preview image right here. I can actually get into the specifics of what I'm trying to benchmark or pull from this particular view. And here you will see the filters option. Within filters, I can actually define what are the filters that are expected within the app, within this particular dashboard. And if certain filters are missing, those will be called out as something that is missing, and this particular test case will call it out specifically. The same thing runs with parameters as well. In the corresponding report, I have not put parameters for the sake of simplicity, but they work in the same vein as filters, that I can define them beforehand. And if they are missing, missing or changed, corresponding error will be popped up, as we'll see shortly. View assertions and data assertions are where you would like to define the assertions based on views and data. And in this particular case, you see that if I have multiple worksheets, when you come to view, I can actually define them via benchmarks, check the columns present within the application, check the filters present within the application once again, and check the raw PDF file that is pulled from the particular system. So on multiple places, we'll be defining what type of rules we can create. So here in filters, I can choose the filters I deem valid. With PDF, I can create a benchmark of what I'm expecting. And in data assertions, I can go one step further and I can go to specific reports and maybe add rules. Right here, I've added a basic rule. This is a SQL rule, which I've added that basically just checks range. I just want to ensure that the range of my market sales are within certain specifics. I've done this as a very simple SQL use case showcase because it's much more easier to understand. But any type of SQL use case that you would like to define, any rule that you would like to define via SQL can be done. Correspondingly, we also give a rule creator, which is being used right here. And as you see, I've just defined that the month date in this particular data set should not be null, and the month date should not consider anything, contain anything from 2015. Again, these are arbitrary rules just to showcase how far the application can go with regards to customizability and how far we can create the rules. One note here: any rule that you create is not a rule that is associated with just this view. If you like a set of rules that you've created, you can easily create a template of those rules and export them and use them on multiple workbooks moving forward. So now that we have done that, we have defined our assertions, we have defined our different type of rules that we can do on our data sets, on our views, on our filters, even on using SQL. Let's see what the results look like. Result window, I can run the result, I can change the books, and also go back to see the schedule and the run history. In this case, I'll be using the run history to just showcase what the typical errors look like. So here we see out of the 4 aspects that we were trying to work with, the dashboard and the return order have failed. We see there are differences present in the application, and in both cases, we see that there are difference in filters and difference in texts. Let's dig deeper. Within dashboards, I see the workbook and columns look fine. There are no changes in them, but the filters have been affected. Particularly the market sees that Africa and APAC, these particular filters that were present in the original benchmarking are missing right now. So that's something we have to keep track of. Going to the PDF, this is something that we will see a lot of. If I go into view results, this actually showcases an explicit comparison between the benchmark result and the run result, and we can see explicitly where things are going incorrectly. You see that our ranges are incorrect. And if I want a better look, I can go to appearance, which does a pixel versus pixel difference. And here you see that, yes, while there is a color difference in itself, that's being highlighted, the difference is also in data sets, where we see certain spikes that are not present in the original data set. This implies that the data set has indeed been changed and altered quite considerably. Of course, all of these are user dependent. If you're expecting certain data changes, you can always turn those off, and you're expecting only view and filter related changes, you can just keep those on. Going back to the returned order, as this was the second place where we found issues. Again, the worksheet and columns seem fine. Filters see the same issue because this is the workbook from where those filters came from. And PDF will also see the same difference, that this particular graph data set has changed, and we see the same in our application as well right here. As we see, yes, there has been a change within the application, and there are different values in the system. So with this, what we have basically concluded is that the functional test plan can not only help you validate not the data sets in terms of filters, in terms of columns, in terms of the the assertions that you've defined, but also in terms of the data sets that you work with. You can go in and define rules that work on this particular data set. And here we see that, yes, the particular rule that we define, that the month order should not be null, is actually valid. Going back to dashboards, if I go back to that, I do believe there was another data assertion that we had defined where, yes, this particular range check has failed. There are particular values with the markets where these are not in the particular range that I've expected them to be. Of course, I can view the query, I can go and see the records that are matching the range and so on and so forth. There are a lot of more aspects, but in the interest of time, we'd like to move forward with the next test case. So with functional being done, let's move on to the other aspects, which is upgrade. Before we move into upgrade, let's have a discussion on why exactly you might need such a plan. This is actually one of our biggest use cases in terms of sheer number. We have a client who actually uses, as they've said, more than 10,000 workbooks. I believe I spoke to the client when it was 20K workbooks. And Tableau is basically something that's upgraded. If you want to, you can upgrade every 6 months, but if you want, you can also upgrade it every 4 months. So making sure you're in the bleeding edge of Tableau technology, but also keeping track of around 15K or 10K workbooks can be a hassle. And that's where this particular test plan comes into picture. The upgrade or migration test plan has one major assumption between them. It's going to validate every report that you put into it, considering that it's going to have the same directory as well. So ensuring that the metadata as well as the active directories between your reports, both of them should be validated. That's the assumption here. And that's why you see that along with the test plan, we have pre-upgrade and post-upgrade connections. That is the reason we had two different connections in Tableau as pre and production and development. Advanced options seem the same. It's basically how many types of runs do we want to do, how many valid reports we want to go with, and if you want to run only on the summary data set or full data sets. I know each of these come handy in specific use cases. Sometimes you like to work with the summaries. Sometimes you like to ensure that the raw data between the two is valid. Going to reports, we see that how exactly do we create such reports. So as you see, I go back up here, I have my multiple connections, and within my connection one, I can actually choose the user I'm working with. This is the user that I've used credentials for. Within them, there are multiple subfolders. Within the subfolders, there are multiple specific reports. Here, I have picked up the customer analysis report. And just as a sake for showcasing this particular application, let me quickly open up both the reports right here. So this customer report, and this is the other customer report right here. So of course, in brief overview, both of these look pretty similar. I mean, they have the same systems as we see. But as we're going to see, it's pretty important to ensure that we have an in-depth analysis of the same. So as of now, I've selected just one report. But rest assured, if you want to, you can have 20, 30 reports within the same application being picked up. Same connection, my bad. 20, 30 reports or n number of reports within the same connection picked up. Now, of course, this can be benchmarked. But in this particular case, benchmarking is not strictly required, because the exact validation is going to be against the two systems. Once again, I'm going to go to run histories and see, okay, there's a report failure. And in this case, we see what is the report failure exactly. We give it a little time for the application to go to the data set and pull these things. And as we see, we are rendering these reports in real time. And we see that, okay, there are a lot of varied differences. While the overall metadata might have matched, there's an extra complete column that has been added, as well as data sets are incorrect. Here, I'd like to stress on the difference between appearance and text. Text validation is just going to ensure that the raw numbers and the text that it sees in between the two reports are correct or not. Appearance is going to be much more helpful when you're working with any type of graphical systems, mainly maps and other type of charts. Here we see the entire application is loaded up for one simple reason, that the entire metadata of the application is misplaced. You see these graphs are not exactly present. So this is actually an exacerbated example of what one would expect between upgrades, because this is a very typical scenario where you might see, where if I just go back to opening both this particular windows, where these look pretty same from a first glance, but when you go back to the application as validation, you see that there's a huge lot of difference between them. All right. Of course, there are other aspects to this as well with regards to parameterization, with regards to the filters chosen, and those particular aspects are also being caught. But if those are the aspects that you would like to focus on, be it filters and other aspects, we have the metadata which will be covered in the next webinar. Now let's get into the other aspect, which is data compare. I have two specific test cases built for this. One is report to report, another one is report to data. So for this, I'd like to get back to the start and basically discuss how exactly, what's the business use case for such a system. So going back to the first aspect, let's talk about report to data. At many points, whenever we create a report, the data sets are obviously refreshed. It could also be the data set had minor inconsistencies and the report might have to be recreated. In any case, you as a person who is working at the end point of the data stream need to ensure that whatever report you're going to send forward, be it to stakeholders, be it to clients, be it to your internal system, internal sales folks, you need to ensure that this data set or this reports, whatever the reports are saying, those are valid. And that's where the report to data is a godsend for us, because it's going to ensure that whatever the number that is being shown in this particular report, that is valid. Validated against data set directly. And so here, just to showcase how this looks, we define that our test plan is report to data. We define the comparison between report to query and report to report. In this case, we'll go starting with report to query. We define our connections. In this particular case, our database is a SQL server. Then we move on. Advanced options is in the similar vein, where we get to choose whether we would like to view the complete summary results or the entire data. In this case, I'm going to stick with summary. In add reports, let me just go back to the main crux. The first thing that we do here is we add the corresponding report. Right here. Yeah, there we go. The first thing that we do here is similar to what we saw earlier. Within the reports, you can actually choose if you want to pick up certain dashboards. Within dashboards, we want to pick up certain data sets. Here, I've picked up the order market segment. This basically contains order priority, market, and the number of orders that we have overall. And then in the next subsequent system, in the query, we actually pull a basic query from our DB connection right here. There are a lot of tables within the system, and we ran this particular specific query. This is a particular data set I've pulled riddled with errors just to exacerbate the problem. And it's a very simple SQL. We also have a query builder in the subsequent test case, which will help you create certain complex queries as well. In this case, I've just created the query beforehand. Going to next, I can actually, once we after the query, we move on to the transformation layer. In the transformation layer, as you see, I can build my query. My query is already built, so I won't touch it for now. But I can test out and see if the results match or are in the same vein as intended. So here we see, yes, we have APAC, Africa, we have the columns as intended. As a final step, we actually go to mapping this application. We have both the columns that we want to map within the two data sets. One is taken from our report, one is taken from the raw DB. And finally, we have our run application. So going back, we can see all the other aspects right here. And I've already run the system. So I'm just going to showcase that particular run. Oh, apologies. Now we get to see this particular system run once again. So in this case, what we see is that, yes, that run is that fast. We see that this particular status has failed. And why has this application failed? Well, because we have about 60 mismatches within the application and about 40% match. Again, the 60% match is again because I've riddled the data set with errors. But as you see, we can validate that this particular report, within this particular report, 40% of the data sets for this order market segment dashboard is actually validated against the raw data itself. But there are mismatches as well. There are data sets there are values which are present only in one of the data sets, but not the other. There are aspects of this as well. There are unique mismatches in this case. We go one step further. We also ensure that there are no duplicates within both the reports as well as the query. And if there are any unique keys within the application, we see if there's duplicate data, we see if there is any query data. Finally, if you want to go ahead with this, we can also look at specific queries, subqueries, or we can even go ahead to download the specific report as well. Once again, if you want to put this put this in an automated system, say you want to integrate this with a CI/CD tool, that particular integration is supported by our application, where in case the corresponding test case fails, the report and notification can be sent directly to the intended users. Going back to our business use case, we started with a particular report where we saw we were not so confident, and we see that yes, not being confident was pretty valid because there is a 60% mismatch within our records. And we can have a good look, and we can send this back to the developer. We can send this back to the data team for further details. Now let's discuss report-to-report validation. So in report-to-report validation, it starts off pretty much the same. Let me just go back right here. Just to showcase on how exactly this works from this end, I want to go to report. I can just click from here as well. I just wanted to showcase how this application is working from this end. So it works in the similar vein where you have your two connections defined, and you can go through the application checking exactly what are the reports. It's very similar to what we just saw. And since we have about 20 minutes left, I'll stick to this particular test case itself. Here, similar to what we just saw earlier, it's report versus report, except in this particular case, I can have two separate connections altogether. So in this specific case, what I see is that, yes, the order versus orders is being caught. There are other aspects. Null is another column that's introduced in the new report. So I've just created two separate reports within the same connection, within the same site itself, and I just want to validate these two. This can be really helpful when I'm trying to validate the reports from other teams, from other environments as well. But I do not want to go through the effort of defining a complete upgrade environment. So again, each of these test cases have specific use cases, and all of our clients have a very varied experience, because some of the clients prefer upgrade test plans, some of the clients prefer report compare, another client prefers regression. So we have everything for everyone in this case. And here, as you can see the reports, we see the order summary also has something of a higher system right here. And if I go to compare, you'll see that okay, there are some major chunks in the order market segment that are missing. But if we go in deeper, we'll see that with regards to report, yes, there are some other changes right here as well. So that's a summary with regards to report to report test plan and data compare as a whole. Finally, we come to the most basic type of report test plan. This is regression. The way this particular application works is quite rudimentary in comparison to our complex functional test plans. The way this particular application works is that you define the corresponding report you would like to benchmark. You go into the reports and correspondingly you benchmark the specific report. Here I have already benchmarked Superstore production. I can benchmark all 10,000 reports that I have right here. And then when I go to run, I can actually run this benchmark once again, and I see that there are reports. So in the main crux here, the main difference, of course, we have seen this a few times as well, but the main difference here is that report test plan is working against the same report, except with the previous version of the report. Report compare is working with two different versions of reports altogether. And upgrade is working with the same report in different environments. So there's a pretty significant difference between the three, and the three of them hence can be used in very separate use cases as well. Once again, since these are the different reports and we have already seen this report change, the null component was added, and that has caused a lot of aspects. And even the legend has been missing from this particular application. This is something, because of the highlighting, I can easily pick up and move forward and see that, okay, this particular aspect is something I have to worry about, because in my new report, I do not have the legend itself. Something to worry about. So with that, we basically wrap up most of the plans that we had to do. In the next webinar, we'll be focusing on the 4 test plans which are going to be succeeding this. These are the functional related ones, which will be catalog test plan, stress test plan, performance test plan, and security test plan. And finally, I would like to give a quick understanding on how exactly the application works with regards to Selenium, action filters, and other aspects. Just as a reiteration, since we have a bit of time right now, I'd like to say how exactly the application works. So in this particular case, the connection that I've defined is defined with a particular user and access. So if this particular user does not have access to certain data sets, the corresponding data set pulled from this particular credential will also have those same limitations. We're basically using impersonation as a second layer to ensure that this particular report is being validated from the perspective of this particular user itself. And that way, if this particular user can anytime have access to data sets by any mistake and get access to data sets which he or she should not have had, there can be rules created specifically for that. Of course, we have a complete different security test plan as well. This is just to ensure the explanation on how exactly this particular BI connection works. Once again, the system uses Selenium in accordance to the JavaScript methods and the REST APIs of Tableau as whole to connect to the corresponding Tableau system, pull the requisite data sets, the reports, the snapshot of the filters, parameters, and other aspects, and then works with it as we just saw. All right, with that, I'd like to conclude this particular demo. I'd like to open the floor for more questions. And once again, just to give you a heads up, we do have a second webinar coming. So regarding these questions, we'll be more than happy to talk about these test plans as well. So yeah, over to you, Dave.
We appreciate everybody's time today. Again, Datagaps focuses, on the complete data journey, not just the consumption in the data analytics platform, but also as data comes into the environment. We test that environment as well. Make sure the data quality is there, the ETL processes are working properly, and so on. We're also pride ourselves in being very collaborative in our approach to interacting with prospects and clients. We like to see the ideas that other people have, and we have a lot of improvements in the product based upon these kinds of interchanges. So we're very collaborative in our approach. We're also offer a trial based upon either doing something in your environment behind your firewalls, or at times we do this in our environment in a sandbox where you can play with the technology that's more on the DataOps side than the BI Validator side. BI Validator takes very little time to install, and so we typically will do that the trials based upon that in your environment. So with that,
Dave, we have one question from the audience.
okay.
So,
Yes, I was actually going to answer that. Let me take that up, Surya.
sure,
So the
thanks.
question is, what is the debug information in the log if the test case fails? Well, as we saw in the demo, if there's a test case that is failed, be it any kind of failure, be it the comparison failure, comparison against a report, comparison against data, both the exact snapshot of the full report and the data sets is taken. So if you say if you have a data assertion failure where the data sets between the reports or report versus data does not match up, the records which do not match up show up along with the report. That's what exactly was not matched in the corresponding report as well. So basically what was not matched in report, what was matched, what was present only in the report, not in the data set, every other aspect along this line is matched. And the same translates to rules and other regression rules that we have present. So if there's a view that was missing, if there's a filter that was additionally added on top of the existing filters, or if there were a few records which did not pass the SQL rule that we define, the number of records that were failed, the record list, the exact status, why, what were these things that failed, the query sent out on this, what was the query that was run on this that deemed this as failure, everything is kept safe within this particular application. So you can go back to run history, and even if it's something that happened like 7-8 runs or up in the past, you can actually go back and check what happened in that specific run in detail.
Thanks, Shivanshu.
Yes, I think the other one is, yes, can BI Validator be used to business object reports? I believe so. Yes, the answer is yes. And for more details, again, feel free to contact us directly and we can have a separate discussion regarding BORs there.
Okay. Thank you. And again, we appreciate your time. If you'd like to have a session where we discuss your particular requirements, both on data ingestion, but also in data analytics, feel free to reach out. We do these discovery calls every day, and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you. And this concludes the session. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Shivanshu, for that. Finally, what version of Selenium is it compatible with? One of the users is just asking, so we don't.
I've sent them. We're working with the latest version of Selenium as of now, and we try to keep up with it because it works both for our login purposes. We need Selenium as well as for integration purposes. That's a very good question, and we keep up with the latest version as of now. The exact version 0.0 is something I don't remember on the top of my head, so apologies for that.
Great. Thanks, Shivanshu. Thank you so much. Thanks, Dave. I hope there are no more questions here. And if there is anything, please do reach us. We have dropped a couple of links in the chat window. You can go through the document. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot, folks.